Good morning, everybody. We are Group 3 in Info 5720, and today we are going to be discussing copyright laws and internet safety in our presentation, Learning Copyright from CopyWrong. So probably the first question you're asking is, why do we need to know this? You guys are journalism students, and so it's important for you to understand that not only is it a standard in Texas, but it's also the law. So the standard reads, identify the foundations of press law, including copyright law, the fair use exemption, and ownership of intellectual property. Not only does the state tell us we need to know copyright law, but we have to be able to use it. We must cite our sources whenever we use work that's been created by somebody else, or otherwise it's considered both an ethical and a legal violation. So what are we talking about when we're talking about copyright? So it's the technical version from copyright.gov says copyright is a form of protection grounded in the U.S. Constitution. So in simple words, it means that people work really hard to create their own literary works, art, poetry, articles, or anything else you find on the internet, and they deserve the money that they make off of their labor. So copyright is that protection grounded in the U.S. Constitution that prevents others from taking their work for free or altering someone's work without their permission. The history of copyright laws began over 4 centuries ago with the Statute of Anne in Great Britain. The little story goes on April 10th, 1710, the Statute of Anne was enacted in Great Britain. It was named after their Queen Anne and served to protect authors' ownership rights in consideration of their literary works. So under this statute, authors had to register their works with the Stationers' Company Register Book as a means of protection. An author had copyright of their work for 14 years and could regain copyright at the conclusion if they were still alive. And this history in Great Britain was a foundation and the inspiration for the United States' eventual copyright law enacted in 1790. So it's been around for a long time, and the laws have stayed pretty consistent, which just is more proof that we need to know and understand and use these laws because of their importance. The U.S. Copyright Office issued updated information last year on works subject to copyright, or what can be copyrighted. And these include, just going down this list, literary works like books, novels, stories, or articles, musical works and accompanying words such as compositions, songs, and lyrics, dramatic works and accompanying music such as plays and musicals, pantomimes and choreographed routines for dance and movement people, pictorial, graphic, sculptural works for art people, motion pictures or movies, and other audiovisual works, sound recordings, which are works that result from the fixation of a series of musical, spoken, or other sounds, and any architectural works, including blueprints. This is just a visual representation of copyrightable materials. So it shows literary works, paintings, photos, drawings, films, music, choreography, sculpture, just a little reminder of what can be copyrighted. And if you create any of these things, you can copyright it and protect your creation. So let's just take a minute and discuss a few of these. Who can tell me an example of a film protected by copyright law? Pretty much all of them, right? What about choreography? So that would be even like, a music video, and anything that that you see of a ballet, any type of choreography can be copyrighted. Even cheerleading routines, anything like that. If somebody creates that, they have ownership, or they have the option of ownership over it. Now, as cut and dry as copyright may seem, and the laws may seem, there are also limitations that go along with it, one of which is expiration. So we talked a little bit earlier about the history and the Statute of Anne, and their copyright expiration was 14 years. Now, in the United States, our expiration is usually 75 years after the creator's death. It becomes public domain. So public domain is a pretty important term that we're talking about, and it refers to creative miracles or materials that are not protected by intellectual property laws such as copyright, trademark, or patent laws. So the public owns these works, not an individual author or artist. Anyone can use a public domain work without obtaining permission, but no one can ever own it. So 75 years after a creator's death, the work just becomes the public's. So another limitation would be orphan works, where the owner or the creator cannot be located. Fair use means that use is up to the user's discretion. A parody is a limitation, meaning that the copyrighted work is to poke fun at something else. Or the last limitation on this slide is quotes or sayings cannot be copyrighted, but you still have to cite things if they are in quotes. These works are not protected by copyright, and this comes directly from the U.S. Copyright Office. So ideas, procedures, methods, systems, processes, discoveries, all of those things are not protected by copyright. An idea is not protected. Works that are not fixed in a tangible form, like a choreographic dance, like we just talked about, or in improv, it hasn't been written down. So if it's just coming from your mind, it's not written down, that cannot be copyrighted. Titles, names, slogans, familiar symbols or designs, some lettering, some coloring, and then a listing of ingredients or content. So like a recipe can't be copyrighted. There are a few copyright defenses that we should talk about quickly. The first one, and it's probably the main defense, is invalidity, which means that somebody is trying to copyright some work that is not original. Independent creation means two people are independently creating very similar work to each other, kind of parallel, but you can't copyright something like that when the same or similar work is being done. And then admission to copying means that the user admitted to copying, but claims the amount used was very small, which we will also talk later. Now we're going to look at a couple examples, and we're going to discuss it in your groups that you're sitting in. So let's first look at this heading. It's headed copyright infringement. But what are some symbols that you recognize? Pretty much all of them, right? So these symbols are official trademarks and logos, which are protected by copyright. And so you can't go ahead and use these certain symbols in your own work, because you are taking somebody else's work from them. That's their slogans. So here's the next one. why do you think this is copyright infringement? You see a Star Prea coffee and a Starbucks coffee. And this has been a big lawsuit going on because Starbucks feels like this Star Prea coffee is stealing their logo, which they feel is bringing their customers to this other coffee shop instead and kind of tricking them a little bit. So they are under a copyright infringement battle right now, trying to figure out if this is in fact infringement or not. Same thing with this. Here's McDonald's on one side and McDowell's on the other side, and they are extremely similar. They're not the same, but they are similar enough logos that it is negatively affecting commercial profit. This last one I think is just so silly. On the left you have a Balenciaga shoe. You can see the price there. And then on the right is a Steve Madden shoe. They're very similar for much less money. And they are also in a copyright infringement battle right now, trying to see if these are similar enough, because if they are, then Steve Madden would be negatively affecting Balenciaga's profits because they are offering something extremely similar for a much smaller price point. With respect to trademarks, there is a violation when you use a trademark without the authorization of the owner. So to be more specific, the infringer, or the person doing the act, is using a trademark which is confusingly similar or identical to a trademark that is already registered, such as a Star Prea coffee versus Starbucks or McDonald's versus McDowell's. So when this happens, the people who buy those certain goods or services will not be able to distinguish between the brands. So hence, the user who has the trademark registered will face losses. They are cutting a loss because people are getting their business confused with another business. So bringing it back to our journalism class, let's talk about fair use. So there are 4 situations where using copyrighted material for teachers and students may be appropriate for a limited amount of time. So an educational example is a teacher may copy a class set of material that's copyrighted for a very specific period of time it's needed, and only for the specific number of students in class. It cannot be brought to the general public. It has to be for a certain class and a very specific number of copies made. In an entertainment example, the use of photos, music, or videos in the classroom are permissible as long as educational instruction is occurring. And the teacher must offer it for free. They can't charge to show a movie. It has to be for free, and it has to be because of education. Smaller portions. Our authors are more lenient on copyright rules within the classroom when small portions of their work are used rather than large portions or a whole book. Like, they're much more lenient when we just use a chapter. And teachers should not use videos like Pride and Prejudice in their classroom using YouTube. They should obtain a legal copy that's not going to negatively impact sales of the creator's work. So infringement can only take place if a trademark has been registered by the creator. So in simple words, if a person sells his goods as the author or as the goods of another, then the trademark owner has to take action, because this becomes a case of passing off something unofficial for the real thing. So trademark owners whose trademark has not been registered can't bring an infringement suit. But if it has been registered, then that owner can take legal action. And all materials on the internet are copyrighted unless they are stated otherwise. So what does this mean for what we can legally copy or use? Intellectual property ownership is protected under the law, and I think the most important takeaway from this lesson is to just ask permission or cite whatever you have found because otherwise it could be considered plagiarism and it could be illegal